What's some of the best advice you've heard from the people who are sober, like life advice?
I mean, it's usually very simple things. You can start your day over at any time. Blew my mind. I used to watch that show, Intervention. I was sitting there and I was wishing and hoping somebody would do that for me.
Oh, interesting.
Obviously not enough to do it for myself, but like
someone else do the work.
Viktor Frankl, who wrote Man's Search for Meaning, one of his quotes was, in between the stimulus and response, there's a space. And in that space is our ability to choose. And in that choice lies our power and our freedom.
Welcome to 2%. I'm your host, Michael Easter. Last night, me and one of my good friends, Ryan Soave, we went and saw the band Phish at the Las Vegas Sphere. So I want you to picture two sober guys in a sea of hippies who are all smoking weed, all probably on psychedelics, and there we are, having an amazing time, despite the fact that we weren't on any substances. Now, Ryan's background is he is one of the top therapists in the country. He started in addiction medicine after he himself got sober, but he has since pivoted to working with high performers in all different areas, helping them get their mind right, helping them get their habits on track in order to live a better life, have better relationships, make more money, just be better people in general. So this morning, after the show, running on 3 hours of sleep each, I dragged Ryan into the studio. I sat him down and I stole as much of his wisdom as I could for all of you. So we had a long, sweeping conversation. We talked about habit change. We talked about the real underlying reasons people do things that seem to be counterproductive and hurt them in the long run. We talked about how to improve your life, how to improve your mindset, and a lot of different things that will help you, the listener, and leave you with tools to act better in the real world right now. So let's bring on Ryan. Ryan, thanks for coming on the show, man.
Thanks for having me. This is great.
All right, we went to Phish last night at the Sphere. How did it feel to be one of the only sober human beings in the building, in addition to me and maybe 3 to 4 others?
I think there might have been some more than that, but it was definitely well, I think first off, it started at 8 o'clock. I think both of us agreed that we probably would have been close to in bed by then.
I went to bed at 7:30 the night before, if that gives you any context.
Right. And I flew from the East Coast, so it was like 11 p.m. start time, and but I think it was great. It's a really cool psychedelic experience without the psychedelics.
Yeah. I will say we were surrounded in a fog of actual burned marijuana smoke and vaped marijuana smoke. The people in front of us were clinging to their vape pens like they're, climbing Everest, and this is their oxygen line. It was just like, it was funny.
There's a lot of gummy bears being eaten. I don't think they're the same ones that my kids eat.
Yeah,
either.
I don't know if you saw, but at some point in the second set, the lady next to me actually passed out for 5 minutes. Yeah, her beer can kind of spills on my foot a little bit. I was like, you're okay. You'll wake up eventually. It's a good time.
Yeah, it was awesome. It was what an experience.
Yeah, it was rad. So I got a question for you. How long have you been sober?
18, a little over 18 years.
When you got sober and in your process of sobriety, have you had to relearn how to have fun?
That's a great question. I think the very short answer to that is yes. But also, as I look at the last few years of my drinking, it wasn't fun.
Yeah.
I wasn't having fun.
It starts fun.
It started fun. It started, and I think for a lot of people, it enhances their life. We were talking about this yesterday. For most people, it means conviviality and making things, reducing inhibitions. But, for me and people like me, and
people like me,
people like you, I'll let you say that, you people, it was, it crosses that line. And it wasn't, I used to think I was I needed to drink, and I was like Bukowski or Hemingway, or Fitzgerald, and this creative process. But the thing was, I didn't write. Yeah. So I was just doing the drinking part. And then I forgot that most of those guys died either alcoholic deaths or killed themselves. Right. So,
yeah. I had the same thing as a writer going because I was I was still drinking when I was working in magazines and writing professionally. I was like, well, Hunter S. Thompson, look at all the, he drank, he did drugs. Hemingway drank. And then, you go, well, wait a minute. Didn't they both shoot themselves? And you're like, is that how we want this to end? Right. I don't know. Maybe I should rethink that one.
Yeah. But, I think probably I had to learn how to have fun in general, and, it was, I had a mentor when I was 32 when I got sober, and I had a mentor who'd been sober a long, long time. And he used to say to me, the only difference between me and you is I've been through more life experiences without picking up a drink. And so, it was relearning a lot of things because, so many functions and, dinners and weddings and all of this stuff have to do with drinking.
Right.
And what I also realized is most people didn't drink like I thought they did, especially as I was a little bit older, like in my 20s, of course, you're in college or teens and they do. And I think you kind of touched on that yesterday about talking about, everybody ordering a drink and wondering if, the first time, I forget what you said.
I'll tell the story. So I was maybe 3 weeks into sobriety and I'm at a work trip. Long story short, I'm with all these other journalists. We're out at this nice dinner. And there's probably 15 people at the table. The waiter starts asking for drink orders, and I'm going to be the last person to give the order. And everyone, I'll have a martini, I'll have this beer, I'll have this wine. And the whole time he's taking it, I'm going, oh my God, what are people going to do when I order water? Everyone's going to look at me and they're going to say, why aren't you drinking? And then I'm going to have to explain myself. And so I'm like building the narrative in my head, like, okay, this is the story you're going to tell, blah, 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 blah. And then the waiter gets to me and he goes, what do you have to drink? And I say, I'll just have a water. And nothing happened. No one looked up from their menu and it was like, oh, maybe I care more about alcohol than the average person.
Right.
Yeah.
What was worse, that, thinking that everybody was going to worry about you and concerned about you, or when you ordered it that nobody really cared?
Yeah, well, also the self-obsession of thinking that like people are really just like, they're just waiting to see what I order at this meal, right? Right? And then they're going to wonder, what am I getting for dinner? Because that's really important to them.
When I think I'd been sober for about 4 years, and I got invited to a wedding, and I'd been to some stuff before, but this was a wedding from somebody from high school. And it was out in the mountains out west, and I was going, and I knew a couple of the people going there. This wasn't a big crew of friends that I had, and the other people that I knew were in the wedding, and I wasn't. And so I went out by myself, and even though I'd been sober for a while, I'd kind of been in a community and around people that were not drinking. And, sobriety is a lot more than about not drinking. That's maybe what it starts with. It's, building a life. At least for me, it's building a life where that stuff doesn't have a place. And then, what's the saying? I gave up everything for one thing, and all I had to do is give up one thing for everything.
Yeah.
The not drinking part's kind of a gateway to something else. But, I was 35 years old at this point, and it was pretty. I was going to a wedding with people that I'd been around before, and that I knew from my history, and then a bunch of people that I didn't know. And I got there, and I just made this decision. I was like, I'm just gonna go for it. And what that meant to me was, I'm gonna be social. I'm gonna connect with other people, even though I don't know them. I went down to the lobby, and these other people were. Before the wedding, we're going whitewater rafting. I was like, can I come? I never would have done, gone up to strangers. And I went, and I had a great time. And then I didn't tell anybody, the people who invited me knew I was sober, but I didn't really tell anybody that. But I obviously wasn't drinking.
Yeah.
So I had this whole dialogue like you did. What am I going to say? And a lot of times it was just like, I've had enough. And, I drank a bunch of, seltzer waters or, club soda and lime or something like that. Mm-hmm. And I just had fun. I'm not like a dancer or anything, but I danced at the wedding. It was super late at night. I had a blast. And about 8 months later, and I remember where I was in a hotel room in Denver, and I opened my phone, and I think it was like a Facebook message. This is many years ago, and it was like a Facebook message. And this guy who'd been at the wedding had found me and messaged me, and we'd met there, but I'd never, I didn't keep up with him.
Yeah.
And he said to me, I just want to let you know, after that wedding, I stopped drinking, and I've been sober for 8 months. And the only reason I was able to do it is because I noticed you weren't drinking, and I could see that you had a great time and could actually live your life.
Oh, wow. That's cool.
And like, I didn't go there to do that. You know, it was just attractive to him in some way. I had no idea that. And I'm totally absorbed in myself. Like you were talking, not to diagnose you, but
no,
like
go ahead and diagnose. I think your diagnosis is spot on.
But you know, I is self-absorbed and worried about me. And I was like, holy, you know, like I just helped somebody.
Yeah.
And I had no idea.
Right.
I wasn't trying. It was just like, and you know, I've had so many experiences like that over the years. And you know, now I have a lot of friends, you know, I was telling you yesterday, like a lot of our friends are sober. We didn't pick it that way. They're just the kind of ones we're around, and we have awesome time. You know, what I've learned about myself is I don't need something to lower my inhibitions.
Right.
Like I can get in enough trouble, and you know, like I only open my mouth to switch feet usually, and I can do that without drinking.
Yeah, there you go. I like it, man. So walk us up to your sobriety. What happened that led you to get sober?
Drank too much.
Next question.
No, you know, as a kid growing up, you know, I didn't ever like, I was involved in a lot of stuff. I had a lot of friends. I was voted most likely to succeed. I was president of the student body. I was not voted most likely to have to go to rehab and then get sober, but that's the way it worked out. And I'm grateful. I'm really grateful for that. But, you know, even though like I was involved in a lot of things and, like on the outside, even in school, it looked like I could, you know, I was voted most likely to succeed. It looked successful. Like I always felt different. Mm-hmm. And nobody was like telling me that. I did. I felt.
Yeah. Like you couldn't connect with people?
I don't know if I even thought of it like that.
Yeah.
But potentially I just kind of felt like everybody else kind of had something going on or were connected in a way that I wasn't.
You couldn't get there.
Even if I was on the inside, I felt like I was on. I remember, I don't know we're going to go into this, but when I was in treatment, I had a lot of like loneliness. And I remember the therapist that I had said, you know, write a letter about when you remember you were most, like first time you felt lonely. And I wrote something about this time we had moved. I was probably 6th grade. We'd moved from one neighborhood to another, and it was like kind of across town. And that neighborhood I'd been in was like all these kids that it was full of kids, and this one wasn't. Mm. And I remember that no one was like calling me to go play with them or, you know, anything like that. And of course, I thought it was, not of course, but I thought it was, you know, they didn't want me.
Yeah.
And I don't remember all the details, but I actually reached out to my mom and I said to her, you know, do you remember me ever feeling lonely? And she described that exact moment or time. Mm-hmm. But then she said to me, you know, and I don't know if she'd ever told me this, but she's like, you know, I reached out to some of their moms to see if, you know, anything was going on basically. And
interesting.
And she said they came back and were like, yeah, they're just waiting for Ryan to call. Like,
there's a lesson.
Yeah, I'd kind of been in the middle and maybe seen as a leader in that, but I never felt like that.
Yeah.
And so I finished college and I went and worked in a family business for my dad. Mm-hmm. And then I started my own business and I moved away to a different part of Florida. And I was in a new town and I was in a relationship and that relationship ended. And I was oriented in this way for some reason that I didn't know how to deal with really difficult emotions or failure. And mm-hmm. if like a relationship would end, it would just crush me. And I would, you know, and I've worked with young men over the years where, you know, they're 18, 19 years old and, you know, they're like devastated by a relationship that ended and like they're falling apart. And I'll be like, how long were you together? And they'll be, you know, 3 months.
Yeah.
And that's the reaction.
But in the moment.
But when you peel it back, it's not that relationship ended. it's that they were projecting out that, this is who I'm going to be with forever.
Yeah.
They're grieving like the rest of their life.
Right. They had a big story behind it.
Right. And I realized I did that with a lot of things. And, I also was not really doing something that I wanted to do for my career. And I'd had this orientation that, I always wanted to kind of be like a teacher or something where I could help people. But I got in this thing, once I make enough money, then I'll do that. Like, I need to make a few $1 million and then I can have a beat up pickup truck and live in a small house. Well, like, it didn't even, and be a teacher. Not that you have to live in a small house and a beat up pickup truck to be a teacher, but that was kind of like this, I needed some sort of like safety net.
Yeah.
What I've learned for me and a lot of people I work with is like that orientation of once I make enough, once I've got that, there's no dollar to stop on.
Yeah. It's just the goalpost moves.
Yeah.
Once you get to whatever it is, 2 million, you're like, maybe 4. Yeah. Once you get to 4, you go 12. 12's the number.
12's the number. And it was like, it keeps going like that, and fortunately, the universe had a different direction for me. I was in I was building houses and doing real estate stuff, and it was 2008, and everything started falling apart before that. And for me, it wasn't like one day, something happened and everything crashed for me financially, but it started over a period of time, and I used that as a great kind of excuse to kind of fall back. And I was drinking alone, and didn't want to. I found myself being suicidal, and what I learned about that for me, it wasn't that I didn't want to die. I just didn't want to live in this way that I was living, and I didn't see another way out, which was crazy because I was not a stupid person, and I had resources, but I never talked to anybody about it. I kept it all inside, and not that other people probably didn't see it, but, it's also like, in your, at least for me, and I think a lot of people in their teens, 20s, your people are partying, and then like they start to grow up and move out of it. And I wasn't doing that, but it wasn't like I was living this big party. It was like, I'd go to the party or like a wedding, and then everybody would go back to work on Monday, and I would just keep going.
Yeah. Party didn't stop for you.
Yeah. And it wasn't a party. This was like alone.
Yeah.
Party of one. Party of one. Of course I would, try to, I would sometimes go out to bars and stuff like that because I wanted connection with others, but I just, and so fortunately, I had a business partner who could really see what was happening, and he grabbed me one day and was like, I don't want to talk to you till you get some help, and had called my parents. And I used to watch that show Intervention when it first came out.
Yeah. Was that Dr. Drew?
I don't remember if that was Dr. Drew. It was something like that, but it was like where they would do an intervention. I remember, I think it was like the first season, and I was sitting there and I was wishing and hoping somebody would do that for me.
Oh, interesting.
Obviously not enough to do it for myself.
Yeah.
But like
someone else do the work.
Right. And I didn't want to go somewhere. I wanted it to like not interrupt this life that I thought I was living. And, so once they kind of said, I thought I was hiding all this stuff. Once they said, you need to get some help, I said yes. And
do you think most people who have a problem with whether it be a substance or a behavior, is there a ratio of people who go, I know I have a problem, but I'm not doing I'm waiting for something to happen, versus those who are totally like, no, I don't have a problem at all, but everyone around them is going, you have a problem.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know percentages, but I think deep down, denial is a very powerful drug.
Yeah.
I mean, I heard a guy recently say, he goes, I had no problem accepting the fact that I was going to die an alcoholic death. Like, he just totally accepted it. Like, I just thought that was the path he was on. But even in that, that there's like something not right, but you kind of become okay with it.
Right.
And
you just can't see another path out.
Yeah. Or
it's like you're in the forest, there's just trees everywhere. You're like, well, this is the only way to go down here. Yeah.
And just surviving, but I think, I have a lot of people that will, call me and say, we need to do this big thing to try to get someone in treatment and stuff. But sometimes I'll just say, have you asked them? Like a family, I mean, a lot of times they haven't.
Yeah, interesting.
And I'm not saying every time you ask somebody, they're going to say yes, but, you know, there's like sometimes these family dynamics that stop people from even addressing the problem. They're just like moving around this giant elephant in the room.
Yeah.
And they don't know how to deal with it. Or they think if I say it, you know, they're going to say no, and
they're going to get mad. It's going to break the relationship.
Yeah.
The world's going to blow up.
And a no today isn't a no forever, even if they said that.
Yeah.
And so, I don't know. I mean, I think, you know, not all drinking is problem drinking. You know, I could say not all drug use is problem drug use for people. It's going to be what's happening for the individual. But I think at a certain point, when we're talking about people like, you know, me and what you shared about you and a lot of the people that, you know, have worked with in treatment, or, you know, at a certain point, they become, you know, the drugs or the alcohol becomes like a medicine. So, you know, they're using that thing to solve something, right?
Yeah.
You know, I say all the time, you know, addiction is not the problem, it's the solution, right? And
to the underlying problem.
To the underlying problem, whatever that is for somebody, you know. And even if it just started with, I'm going to, you know, I started taking these pills because I had a surgery at a certain point, you know, and they become addicted, and it's causing all these challenges in the world, and or in their world, that creates its own underlying stress, right? So a lot of people, you know, you take away that, they get sober, you take away the medicine, life gets worse emotionally right away for a lot of people.
I think that gets missed so often, and especially by the people around them. It's like, no, if you just stop, your life is going to immediately get better. It's like, no, it doesn't, because you just took away the only thing that could make the person feel like they could function and live in the world.
Yeah.
And there's going to be this period where you're like, well, I still have this problem. The problem doesn't immediately go away that you were using substance or doing the behavior to solve that problem. So the problem's still there, but now you're like, I have no tools to figure this thing out. What the hell do I do? And that sucks.
Yeah. I mean, I can't tell you how many like families I've had at times that like they want the person, their loved one, to get sober or clean so bad. And then they do. And, you know, a few weeks into it, they're like, they were easier to deal with when they were smoking pot. You know, they don't really want them to go back to that, but, you know, they're running around kind of like a live wire. But, you know, with my story, like, you know, as I'm telling you this, it's not this, you know, I hear people tell these really super dramatic, amazing stories, and they're, you know, end up with a cartel and, you know, almost dead or kidnapped or something. I don't really have that. You know, it was just kind of this, Thoreau, I think in maybe it was in Walden, said most men lead lives of quiet desperation.
Yeah.
And I was in this quiet desperation for a long time, and I just felt really stuck. And what you said, I used to sit there going, I actually said one time to a friend, I think I'm going to make a t-shirt that says I'm just waiting for something to happen. So I was like observing life. And that's its own kind of suffering.
Yeah.
And fortunately, that desperation got turned up loud enough that it was like, oh, I need some help.
Yeah.
And that's where I think the people that, you know, end up needing help for addiction and alcoholism, you know, sometimes they're the real fortunate ones, because they don't have to settle anymore. Like they get this gift of desperation because it was like, I'm going to die.
Yeah.
Well, we're all going to die. You know, you pointed that out to me.
Yeah. But ideally, let's not make that, you know, too soon.
Not too soon, and to be able to live well.
Yeah. And let's ride out the rest of the years we have in a way that is helpful and not miserable.
100%. People are looking for some sort of solution, almost like a sense of mindfulness or even a spiritual solution when using drugs and alcohol, when it gets to that point for those people. Again, this is not everybody, but people will say, in recovery will say live one day at a time. Well, a lot of people in addiction were living one day at a time. Yeah. You know, and, you know, looking for some sort of thing that, you know, we hear it even with regular people that, I say regular people, like people that are what do we call them? Normies.
I'm okay with considering us irregular.
Irregular people. Well, I know I am. You know, I mean, it's in our language. Like we're going to go to the bar and take the edge off, right?
Yeah.
Like we're going to, you know, and, you know, it's kind of like old guy used to know, you say 3 martinis works a lot faster than a prayer.
Yeah.
It just doesn't work long and it doesn't work well. But I mean, people are using it in a way. And I think to almost find mindfulness.
Yeah.
It's just not something that over time, if you're using it too much to be too mindful in that way, can cause problems.
I feel like for me, I was like you in the sense I just felt like I was different, somehow different. I couldn't put a finger on it. Like I had a hard time connecting with people. But to that guy's point about 3 martinis, if I have 2 drinks, all of a sudden I'm like, oh, I can open up. No, I can actually connect with people. I just need to have a couple drinks. Problem is that once I have 2, I go, yeah, but if this is good, what would a 3rd be like? What would a 4th be like? And what would insert any number be like?
Yeah, you're just going over the falls pretty soon.
But then you start to go, all right, well, if I have to connect with people and if I want to feel this way, which makes me feel more connected to everyone around me in the world, I'm going to have to use this thing. And then you keep repeating that over time. It works until it doesn't effectively. You know, what did you do after you decided you're like, all right, I got to do something? What did you do, and what were the hardest parts?
You know, then I was 32 years old, and I didn't have, wasn't married, wasn't in a relationship, didn't have kids. You know, so it was business had fallen apart, and I recognized all that. You know, it was kind of like I was holding it together until someone like pierced this little like a little pinprick in the veil, and I was like, I actually felt some relief. And I went to a treatment center, and I stayed in treatment for like 4 months. And, you know, I think what was the hardest part? I remember I had a therapist who I was telling this to. I was like, man, I'm doing the hard work. And he was kind of a rough old junkie from the streets of New York that was just like, had helped thousands of people. And I was like, man, I'm really doing the hard work today. He goes, would you dig ditches today? I was like, you like wrote a letter about your past. And I was like, oh, okay.
Fair enough.
So, but I mean, I think it was, you know, I for better or worse, you know, life wasn't maybe moving in the direction that I wanted to, or, you know, I was barreling down the river to go off the falls. Yeah. But I knew how to live that life, you know, and we become oriented to the lives that we're in. And even when we're going to improve something or do something, you know, there's a real sense of disorientation. Yeah. You know, and that's not a bad thing. But I found in my life, and, you know, when I work with clients too, that, you know, we'll fight that being disoriented, when sometimes that's just where we need to be. Like it's okay to be lost and not know the direction that we want to go yet, and there's a season to kind of sit in that as we reorient. So it was, you know, it was kind of like what you just talked about. It was like figuring out how to be in social situations, you know, figuring out how to, you know, be in a relationship. And I had a mentor that would say, you know, you're not going to know how to work till you work. You're not going to know how to date till you date. You're not going to know how to go to a wedding till you go to a wedding. But you're going to have support in doing that. You know? And
to begin.
Yeah, and I found like, and I, you know, found real community in other folks. And it wasn't about sitting around going, I can't drink. It was like, let's go build let's go build lives. I didn't think that at first. Of course, I was like, my life is over. You know, I'm not going to have fun anymore. Right. And it was like, and it's just over the last, you know, almost 20 years, it's just really opened my eyes that, you know, you can really lean into life. You know, I've got to have some amazing experiences and work all over the world, and, you know, do things like this, and you know, go to a Phish show with somebody that with you, who I met through this is going to sound weird, through a DM on Instagram after we were both on a podcast, and like.
Exactly. I had a guy who told me when I was first getting sober around social situations and alcohol, he was like, look, if you feel like your sobriety is at risk, and you feel like, you know, that is not a good place for you to go to break that, you can just leave. Yeah. You don't have to sit there and struggle. You can just go, oh, I got to go. Something came up. You can just leave a situation and you'll immediately be out of it. And that had never occurred to me. No. I was like, oh. And then so that helped me. Now, I never had to do that, thankfully, but it was like, that allowed me to sort of get into places where I go, all right, if this feels weird to me, I can just leave. I got a text from my mom, whatever. She said, I got to go, you know. What's some of the best advice you've heard from working with people and other people who are sober, like life advice?
I mean, it's usually very simple things like that, like you can start your day over at any time.
Yeah.
I mean, that like blew my mind.
Yeah.
Like, okay, I can reorient. I'm like, it used to be like, I think of it like when you're driving down the road, they call them rumble strips on the highway, and you're like, you kind of go over and it goes, you're meant to kind of ease back on the road. I think the way that I kind of live my life is like, there's a rumble strips, like next set of tires hit them. Now I'm in the ditch. It's like I'm flipped over. The jaws of life are coming. The car's on fire. And then I'll go, oh, can I get some help?
Yeah.
Like, you don't have to do that. Like, you can kind of set up your own rumble strips and guardrails in life to kind of ease back onto it. Or things like what you just said, like you can leave at any time. Like, I thought, okay, I'm going to be the sober driver and drive everybody around while they're partying. And that was like the most annoying thing I could ever do. And it wasn't like I wanted to go drink, but it's like, it's annoying. A friend of mine that I went to college with got sober a while after I did. And he had gone to some wedding with a bunch of friends. And he's like, I realized that after 10 o'clock, there's only one joke. And that joke was like, look how wasted I am.
Yeah.
So I found myself in situations like that. You leave at 10, that everyone's out till 2. And the next day, they didn't even realize I left.
Right. Totally.
So I mean, there are no emergencies, right? The only crisis is a crisis. Unless we have to call 911, there's nothing that we can't wait or slow down to deal with. I mean, just very simple, things like that. I mean, it gets maybe overused, but living one day at a time, and that's not something that's, I think, was invented by 12-step programs. I mean, when we look at, I think was it the Greeks, that carpe diem, seize the day. That sounds very familiar. If you look even, I'm not a biblical scholar by any means, but I know that I think it's in the Beatitudes. Jesus' quote is saying, "Don't have anxiety for tomorrow will have its own anxieties."
Yeah.
I mean, these are things that I think man has been dealing with for a long time, where we'll get like wrapped up in this universe that we create up here that doesn't exist.
Story.
It's all
Start
story.
telling yourself
We're making everything
stories.
up.
Yeah.
And that's not a bad thing. I think we want to, one of the things we work with is like, events are neutral.
Right.
They're all neutral. We bring the meaning to them.
Yeah. And
the goal isn't to stop bringing meaning to events. Otherwise, like last night, we'd be sitting there having a blast going, like, I want to love my wife and, find joy in my children and them with me. Like, we want to, but I think the point is to recognize we are bringing the meaning.
Yeah.
So what meaning are we going to bring to it?
Yeah.
That we don't have to be a victim of circumstance and the world, kind of driving us, that we can actually figure out ways to get in the driver's seat.
Yeah. It's, what story are you going to tell yourself about an event? And there's ways to use that for good, and there's ways that you can get trapped in a story that ultimately hurts you. But if you can go, what narrative am I telling myself around this? Could there be other ways to interpret this can be useful? How do you define addiction? What is it? Big picture, what is addiction?
I mean, I think, and we were talking about this. I mean, there's clinical terms that we can look at. There's substance use disorder, alcohol use disorder. There's kind of the what we use in our language. People say, I'm addicted to my iPhone. I'm addicted to this. And I think it's more nuanced than that. I think a question to ask is, do I have it or does it have me?
Yeah.
Am I in control over whatever is happening, or is it kind of in control?
What are the signs that something is out of a person's control? I think people can inherently know, but what are some of like the guidelines?
I mean, you can look at the things that are happening with them, in their physically, is it harming them in their bodies in some way, psychologically, how they're kind of thinking and relating to the world socially? Is it having an impact on their relationships or their work or legal situations? So there's those kind of things we can look at. I think even in the face of repeated consequences, and that's a big word sometimes because people go, I haven't had consequences, but I like that word. Consequence is like con is with and sequence. So it's like because of this in sequence, right? If I'm doing this, this is happening. And I think a lot of the consequences are for people are internal, like, and how are they viewing themselves, the world, and their place in it. So,
do I like myself when I do this?
Yeah.
And what are my big life goals? And is it helping those or hurting those?
Right. I think everybody kind of can have a little bit different definition of what it is. But when we're working with somebody one-on-one or even in groups, it's like it's an N of one. Like, how is it impacting your life?
Right.
And or not? I don't know if that answers your question.
That answers my question. We've kind of been focusing on substances up till now, but you today mostly work with people who are not addicted to substances.
Yeah.
And so what does that look like and how does it play out?
Well, I think, and this is where we come back to, I'll come back to addiction for a second.
Mm-hmm.
So I like to kind of broaden the definition of that. Like, what is it that we're using to kind of, as a crutch? What is it that we're using to get outside of ourselves? What is it that, and it doesn't have to be in a way that's ruining our lives completely. But, I think that when people will come to ask for help, something's not going the way that they want. Even if it's somebody who's like, I want to get better at this thing, or I'm afraid of taking, life is great, but I don't really know how to deepen my relationship with, a romantic relationship or take on this new risk. Something's not going right. They're saying, I want therapy or I want coaching.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of that's on the surface, kind of in the behavioral realm. How they're acting in the world is they want it to be different. But what we need to do often is we look underneath. So if there's a behavior that they have that they don't like, I always say we got to intervene on that behavior. So if it was addiction, we're going to have them stop drinking. If it's, something else, we can have them stop doing that, or an intervention of they're just coming to ask for help. And then we want to be able to look underneath that to see what are the emotions that are driving that. What are the kind of the ones that we frame as negative or limiting? So fear, regret, or fear, guilt, shame, things like that. And
what is it the solution for?
Right. But what's interesting is that, to me anyway, is that when we can understand their emotions that are driving, and that's not that people are only in this emotion, but if they've got like overwhelming fear, or they might say it's like anxiety or frustration or anger, that it's misplaced, right? They're afraid of, fear is a good emotion if there's something to be afraid of. But if they're, laying in bed on a Saturday night, worried about what's going to happen at a meeting at work on Wednesday, that's not useful.
Yeah.
But when we can understand that kind of emotional state, especially the more limiting negative ones, we can see that the behaviors are almost always in alignment with that. If you're living in fear, you're going to have fear-based behaviors. If you're living in shame, shame-based behaviors.
How do those behaviors play out?
Well, it's going to depend. But if someone's, constantly avoiding situations, or, running from situations, or even sometimes fighting, in relationships or something like that, that might be that they're terrified of, of whatever the result is going to be, or, I think some people will act out in secret behaviors that go against their own morals or their own principles. If they're feeling a lot of shame, they have these shame-based behaviors that sometimes help them make sense of this kind of existential. I kind of break these like shame, for example, and some people might argue this. I think it's a beneficial emotion. Like shame, if I did something to hurt your feelings, or somebody else that I did something, even if I wasn't aware of it, and it was brought to my attention, that feeling of shame is going to give me the energy to come make amends or make it right with my friend.
It's a signal that you did something wrong.
Right.
Like, very useful. I mean, there's a reason that we have bad feelings. They typically, there's an evolutionary context there. It's like shame is useful because it tells the individual, hey, you probably shouldn't have done that thing.
Right.
Like, maybe don't do that again.
Yeah. And so that's beneficial. It's when people are walking around with what I'll call existential shame, just like shame for who I am.
Yeah.
Like, that's not helpful.
Right.
And so, or they're walking around in fear all the time that they're going to be exposed or they're going to be hurt. And if you're in a situation where you might be hurt, that fear is good. But if you're walking around with that all the time, now you're reacting, you're seeing you're seeing the situations through that lens and then reacting in that way. And that goes to kind of what's the level deeper than that, which is their beliefs about themselves, the world, and their place in it. And these are generally these kind of fixed beliefs. And, when I do work with people, we look back at history, not to blame family or, where they came from or their ancestors, but to understand how they were shaped. Mm-hmm. And what are these kind of fixed beliefs that they developed in a way that helped them
navigate the world,
their world, not even the world, their world. So if someone grew up in a family where, and it doesn't always have to be this dramatic, but I'm going to use something more dramatic where their dad was abusive or controlling. They had brothers that were really tough and they were fighting all the time. Maybe they got bullied at school by other men or boys. There may be this underlying belief that men are dangerous. Mm-hmm. That would make sense. If all the men around them are dangerous and they get this, men are dangerous, that's going to help them navigate the world. They're going to be in a hypervigilant state. They're going to be aware when that happens. If that's not resolved in some way, and often it's not because they're not even aware of this. We're putting words to this after the fact. What's going to happen when they grow up, they're not in that environment where men are dangerous all the time. Mm. They're in an environment where, some men may be dangerous, but the majority probably aren't. Yeah. And they want to work in an environment with men. They want to be on a sports team with men. They want to have friends that are men. They have a son. Yeah. And if they still kind of are filtering through this, and this is happening unconsciously and automatically, we'll see them maybe not get close or become really afraid and then avoid situations or, have kind of repressed anger and other things like that. And you don't want to go the other way and go, okay, all men are safe. Yeah. Because now you're walking at 3 a.m. In a dark alley and you hear someone running up behind you, and instead of running away, you're going to turn around and hug them. Hey man, how's it going? That's not we want to be able to get to where we don't have these kind of fixed beliefs about ourselves. And that's what, really impactful trauma ultimately does, is it creates this, it can, when someone has a really impactful traumatic event that they end up with PTSD, it kind of, I think Andrew Huberman always says this, the quickest way to neuroplasticity is a traumatic event, and it's beneficial because it's going to change the way that we see the world so that we can survive it. Right. But that's really, when we look at it underneath, it's about this kind of belief system about who I am, what the world is, and how I fit in it. So when we can understand the beliefs that they carry, it makes sense. That's in alignment with those emotions. So if you believe the world is dangerous, and that's the lens through which you see the world, you think you're going to be walking around with confidence and joy and stuff all the time. No, people are going to be afraid. And if they're afraid, then they're going to have fear-based behaviors. Yeah. And so what I think is helpful for folks is that we can see that it makes sense. We can make sense of almost any behavior. Yeah. The craziest stuff. That doesn't mean it's okay. It doesn't mean that they don't have accountability or responsibility for things that harm other people, but we can make sense of it. And then when they can understand that, it doesn't mean, like I said last night, it doesn't mean that you discover this happened on a Tuesday in 1982, so we know that and I'm going to be better. But it can help people see what they're kind of thrown to, especially under stress. How life flows through the vessel that they are, and they kind of will return to when, and stress isn't always a bad thing. It's like when you take on, I was telling somebody yesterday when I without naming the 12-step program, but in that I had heard guys say that were 25 years sober, I need this program more today than they did the day I came in. And I used to think, what are they doing something wrong? This should be easy for them. Yeah. And now that I'm there, I realize what they meant, which was I was 32 years old. I was living like a boy. I didn't have any responsibilities. The people that I did have responsibilities to just wanted me to stop drinking. Yeah. And then I built a life, and now I've got, a wife, 3 kids, a dog, a home, a career, friends, all the stuff I wanted, but there's more stuff in there for all of my fears to bump up against. Yeah. Right. There's more responsibility. There's more. And so under stress, I can see myself in stress being good. Like I want the stress of leaning into life, but I can easily get into situations where it kind of throws me back to those old kind of unconscious patterns and behaviors. And to be able to be aware of those isn't going to change them right away, but it can make sense of, oh yeah, this makes sense,
When you work with people, is it easy for them to see those patterns and where they might have come from, or does that take a lot of work, or is it probably case by case?
It's case by case, but I think we're actually not that complicated. I don't think it's complicated sometimes because a lot of people will come in and they haven't had a lot of education around this, or not aware, and they're looking at like how the world is doing this to them.
Mm-hmm.
And in a lot of cases, the world did stuff to them. They might have been victims of something, but when they can start to understand, I'm the one now making, like we were talking about, bringing the meaning to all of this, and they can start to get an understanding of, okay, where are these patterns? Where did I pick them up from?
Mm-hmm.
Because we kind of we're all downstream of the generations before us.
Right.
And that doesn't mean we don't have any sort of control, but we call them as I said yesterday, we call them our formative years for a reason. Right. So when we're forming, our brains are forming, like our ego development is happening. We're kind of learning how to navigate this small, tiny little part of the universe that we live in, and we all become very good at it. I think we're all the best in the world at navigating our own lives, as evidenced by the fact that we've survived everything that we've been through up to and including this moment.
Yeah. It's like, to use your example of someone who fears men. If all the men around you were harmful, if you didn't have a response to that was like, I should probably avoid that, be vigilant, that wouldn't help you at all. That would be very strange. That would hurt you.
Yeah.
But you develop that, and then to your point, once you move into another phase of life, carrying that, all of a sudden, although it was useful in the past, it's not going to be quite as useful in the present.
Right. And we learn to play the game of life, our game.
Yeah.
And we all have different games. I grew up, in the 80s and 90s, born in the 70s. I'm getting old, which is a good thing, I guess. It's better than the alternative. I'm not getting young, but not also stopping getting old. Michael Jordan was like the best, and there's all these debates on whether he's the best basketball player ever or not, but
we'll just settle it. He's the best basketball player ever.
But you also don't, people would say like, that guy's the Michael Jordan of accounting.
Yeah.
Like it defined who the best,
right.
His name defined who the best was. Right. So if we can like suspend our disbelief for a moment and imagine that the only game Michael knew was basketball. That's all he knew. He knew basketball court, basketball rules. He didn't know football field, football team. He didn't even know it existed. This is all he knew.
Yeah.
Okay. And he's the best in the world and one of the most competitive people on the planet. And then we take him and we put him on a football field in a football uniform, and he goes out and they throw the ball to him. He catches it. What's he going to do?
I'm going to say like a lean back jumper, probably.
Lean back jumper. He's going to try to dribble it.
Tongue out. Yeah.
Right. Tongue out. Right. on the football field. Yeah. How do you think he's going to look, and how do you think he's probably going to feel?
Yeah.
Like it doesn't fit in that environment. So then, he's not being successful in this. So he goes back, and I don't know Michael, so this is all kind of guessing, but I think they're going to make another play, and he's got a couple options. He could quit, fight, flee, or he could fight and play harder. One of the most competitive people on the planet. He's probably going to try it again. They throw him the ball. Now he's dribbling the football. He's and doing it, playing basketball better than he's ever played on a football field, doing the thing that he's the best at, and he's making less sense. He's feeling crazier and looking crazier, right? So now we pull him back and we're able to say, hey, Mike, this is football. This is what it is. Look, this is the field. These are the rules. This is the ball. Yeah. This is how we play. So now he can start to see that there's another game. And he goes out. Is he going to be the best in the world right away? No chance.
Yeah.
But at least he can play.
At least he can play.
And some of the things that he developed as a basketball player can transfer, right? He's got athleticism. He can see a field. He knows teamwork. He's got hand-eye coordination, all that stuff. And he may never be the best in the world. but he can play.
Yeah.
And I think that's what happens a lot with folks, you know, when they're coming into either whether it's sobriety or healing from other mental health conditions. It's like, you're the best at the game you've been playing. You might not be winning in the way that you want, but we're going to introduce you to a new game and help you develop that game. And it doesn't mean you have to throw everything away that, you know, you've got, you won.
Yeah.
You made it here.
Mm-hmm. What are the first things you have people do when you're working with them? Is there a playbook there, or is it just case by case?
It's a bit case by case, but I think, you know, pretty quickly I want to understand, you know, what their goals are and what success is for them. So if you look at it, going back to a sports metaphor, you know, if you're playing basketball or playing, you know, people know the game, they know the rules, right? The purpose of the coach, which could be like the therapist in my situation, the purpose of the coach is to have the team win. And they know what winning is. It's score more points than the other team.
Yeah.
And to do that in a higher percentage over a season than anybody else.
Right.
We don't know what that is for each individual. You know, even people that look like, you know, everyone sees, well, they're using heroin. They need to stop using heroin. Well, maybe that's a part of it. But what's the life that they want to move toward and build such that heroin's not going to have a place?
Yeah.
You know, and understand that so we can define in a way what winning is for them, because you can't take people from, you got to take people from where they are to where they aren't. You can't take people from where they aren't to where they aren't. You know, if when I was coming out here, I called you and I said, hey, Michael, I need to get to Las Vegas. And, you know, you thought I was in New York. And I said, give me directions. And you started giving me directions to, you know, drive down 95, get on the highway to head west.
Cross the bridge, go through Jersey.
Yeah, but that's not going to help me. Yeah. And even if you knew I was in Florida and you're like, okay, you drive here. Well, you didn't know that I need to be there by tomorrow. I'm not going to get there. So then you go, okay, go to the airport, buy a first class ticket. Well, I only have $200. Like, we have to understand kind of where they want to go, where they are, and then what are the obstacles in the way? What's the territory that they need to travel? And this is different for each person.
Yeah.
Not completely. I think a lot of people are in the same vein and direction, but if we don't have aim, we're aimless.
Yeah. You mentioned how stress, these sorts of past behaviors that don't help often come out under stress. What are things people can do in the moment? Because I know you do a lot of stuff with breath work and other things. What do you think is helpful for a lot of people?
I think now we're getting into your world too. You know, I mean, it's training ourselves to be able to be in those emotionally uncomfortable moments. You know, and you know, as I really, you know, looking from a perspective of the nervous system, I think that we often confuse emotional discomfort with threat, and then we react to it as if it's threatening to us, and we will fight, flight, or freeze in some way. You know, that's the very simple, the 3 F's that people talk about. But you know, we'll try to avoid it. We'll try to run through it. We'll try to, you know, just completely shut down. And so I think in the moment, first off, it's understanding what are the conditions that, you know, we help people understand, like, how do you recognize when you're in one of these reactions?
Yeah.
And then what is it that's driving it? You know, and I think it's often some sort of stressor on the system, not external, but internal, just the way that they're thinking or believing and, you know, I often tell people a very simple question to ask yourself is like, am I or is anyone around me in this moment in immediate physical danger? If you can ask yourself that question, chances are you're probably not.
Yeah.
And most of the situations we're in on a daily basis, like all day yesterday, the most like I was at threat was when we were driving in a car.
Right.
Or when I flew in a plane.
Especially because I'm a shitty driver, so.
I was driving part of the day too. So, but I mean, like, that's probably the most dangerous thing most of us do in a day, and most people aren't afraid of that.
Right.
But like a look from my wife or, you know, a phone call that doesn't go my way can throw me, you know,
into a tailspin.
And most people. So it's like being able to recognize that's happening, and it's going to happen. You know, Viktor Frankl, who wrote Man's Search for Meaning, would say, did you ever read that book?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, he was a psychiatrist or psychiatrist who was in the Holocaust. And I think his book is like required reading for everybody. But, one of his quotes was, and I don't know if it was actually in this book, but was in between the stimulus and response, there's a space.
Mm-hmm.
And in that space is our ability to choose. And in that choice lies our power and our freedom.
Yeah.
The Stoics would say that we had there's like an impression and then a response, right? And and I'm getting back to your question is we can't control the stimulus. We can't control the impression.
Right.
And I think first working with people to say, let's stop trying to stop having those things happen.
Yeah.
Because they're going to happen. You're going to get pissed. You're going to get upset.
Right. If you do that too much, you end up living in like a hermetically sealed bubble. And then that comes with its own set of problems.
Then that has its own stuff. So, all right. So how do we build that space, that space between the stimulus and response, rather than going from, trigger to reaction? And a lot of that is we look back at, I think, very simple things. Like I was saying to you yesterday, if you're in the office and somebody really pisses you off, you're probably not going to lay down on the floor and do a yoga nidra, or you're not going to run to a cold plunge and jump into it. Yeah. So what are some things that can quickly help us act? When we're in a stress response, our sympathetic nervous system is activated. That's a part of our automatic nervous system that kind of controls the fight or flight, right? Yeah. For very simple terms. The parasympathetic is what activates and kind of controls the rest and digest. So, we don't want to. You ever tell someone who's upset or someone you're upset, I remember say to you, just relax.
Calm down.
Calm down. I don't know about you. It never.
It has the opposite effect on me.
It has the opposite effect because it's not a deactivation of the sympathetic nervous system. It's not a deactivation of the stress response. It's an activation of the relaxation response.
Yeah.
So it's an action to activate that part of the nervous system. So how do we do that? Long, slow exhales. Other forms of breath can do that very quickly. I think, and I'm not a scientist, but I think, when we're under stress, we have kind of a certain breathing pattern. Our body's getting ready to, chances are people aren't taking long, slow, deep breaths and exhales, and they're holding their breath or whatever they're doing.
Yeah. Think about when people get nervous. If let's say you're on a stage giving a talk, what is your breath like?
Or on a podcast.
Yeah, or on a podcast after 3 hours of sleep, like both of us are. You don't go, when you're stressed, you don't go, no, you're going, and your heart rate's going like that. And so you need to almost trigger the opposite.
Right. So that's sending a signal somewhere that's saying we're not okay.
Yeah.
Without changing what you're thinking, if you just change that breath and do the physiological sigh or a long, slow exhale, I think that sends another signal that goes, wow, if we can do this, we're probably not in danger.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think too, to your point, whether it's having outside perspective, whether it's a therapist, whether it's even a wise friend, I think that can be useful too. I remember 100%. One time I was, I can't even remember what the event was. It was like an interpersonal relationship thing, and I thought someone had slighted me. I was convinced, and this was, And I tell my friend about this, and he just looks at me and goes, "You ever wonder if you're ever just too damn sensitive?" And I was like, I had not thought of that. You may be onto something there. I was like, this isn't a big deal.
Yeah.
It's like having those outside perspectives too. And I think that I'm making a generalization, but I feel like for men in particular, we don't just talk about stuff,
right?
But if we don't talk about stuff, then we don't get those moments where someone goes, "You ever think you're too damn sensitive?" And you just go, "Huh." And I also think there's differences in what people need. So having someone that you can trust to bounce things off of. Another guy who helped me a lot said, some people need a kick in the ass and some need a pat on the back.
Yeah.
And he's like, you seem like a person who needs a pat on the back, but other people I've worked with, I'm much different with them. They need a kick in the ass.
Yeah. And I mean, if we think about if we were really in a situation that we needed to survive that moment, we really become myopic.
Mm-hmm.
we're focused on, when they talk in 12-step recovery, like the selfishness and self-centeredness, that's the root of our problem. Well, if someone was in our biology, like if we're like, or evolution, I'm sure, or even in the animal world, if you watch an animal running from a predator, they're not thinking about they're just the survival of the fittest, right? They're just going. That's like a survival in those moments is really like a selfishness and self-centeredness. So if we're in survival mode, that's what's going to come out for people. We become myopic, and being able to get perspective in some ways, which is that perspective could be a simple breath that allows us to kind of relax back from what we're experiencing. I mean, literally sometimes I'll tell people to literally lean back in your chair and imagine that like whatever you're experiencing is in front of you. That might seem a little esoteric for people, but it could be going outside. And I had a guy, a mentor that used to say, go outside and get small. Like look at everything else.
Put your stuff into perspective.
Well, yeah, and also get your vision wide angle. I mean, there's some exercises to be able to do where you can like take your thumbs and like literally just try to follow them as they come back. And our brain is like, what is it, 40% visual or something like that? Like that can start to even give us perspective there. Or, talking to a friend, talking to a mentor or a therapist. A few years ago, something was going on. I was with my therapist, and she's this like old school psychoanalyst and like kind of no bullshit. And something had happened, and I was telling her I was angry, and she was like, I said it, and she's like, well, I told her what was going on. She goes, well, that makes sense. You're angry. Like, I think probably most people would be angry about this. And I said, yeah, but I don't like the way I'm acting. I wasn't being nice, and I was really beating myself up for this, And she goes, Ryan, most people when they're angry, they're not nice. And I was like,
yeah.
Like that didn't mean that I didn't need to intervene on some of those behaviors, but it was like, oh, okay, this makes sense.
Yeah.
I can look at it and do something with it. But being able to get that perspective, I think it's also important to get perspective and have people in relationship with people that know you, whether that's a therapist or a coach, but also just friends that understand what's important to you. I don't mind sharing this, but like one of my mentors, like he knows what's important to me in my marriage and with my children, and I could call him and be like, forgive me, Stephanie, but like, because I'm sure she gets like this with me, but like I can't believe she's doing this, and I'm starting to like, maybe I'm not that dramatic, and he'll just stop me and go, do you love her? And he knows I do, and I'm like, yeah, and he's like, all right, and he takes a breath, and nothing else matters after that.
Yeah. Totally.
Like I can most of the stuff was like, if we've had a fight or an argument, a week later, I can never even remember what it was. So how important was it? But in that moment, it can be like the whole universe.
Yeah. I remember someone told me in a similar situation, do you want to be right or do you want to be happy?
Both. Yeah. I mean, listen, I think I'm far more addicted to being right than I was alcohol or drugs. Like
that might be the most common addiction in the world. So back to addiction. Do you think people can be addicted to something that otherwise is publicly seen as healthy, like exercise?
Well, this goes back again to that question, depending on how we define addiction, yes. I think it can people, if we rephrased your question to be something like, can people be harmed or, can their lives be affected negatively by their relationship with things that everybody sees as healthy?
Yeah.
100%. 100%. Like if it's like, of course, people, we should exercise, we should eat right. But if you're doing that at the expense of enjoying your life or the expense of the people you're in relationships, or if you can't exercise today, you're a miserable person.
Right.
Then there's something to look at there.
Yeah.
Does that mean that it's addiction in the way that someone's addicted to heroin? Probably not. But it goes back to Thoreau saying most men lead lives of quiet desperation.
Yeah.
Like, okay, what is it blocking you from?
Yeah. Here's an extreme example. The Wall Street Journal, and this was years ago, they ran a story about men who got so into triathlons, like Ironmans, which requires hours and hours of training a week, that these guys would work all day and then they'd get home and they'd go out for like a 4-hour bike ride. Meanwhile, they're not seeing their family at all. And it interviewed a lot of the wives. They're like, I never see my husband because they want to do this Ironman and I'm having to take on all this work. And even the men were like, I just have to do the Ironman. I want to see my family, but I got to do the Ironman and train. And so I think it's like, what are you giving up by that? And to your point, what's the underlying reason you're doing the thing?
Yeah,
it can become anything can become an escape.
Anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course. And that doesn't mean that you have to stop doing those things either.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, how do you find balance?
Yeah.
You know, and people tend to, maybe it's not all people, but maybe the subset of people that are coming for help or the people that I'm around, but they tend to be like all like very binary. It's like, I got to be all into this or all out of it. And that's just not, it's not black or white. Like life is in the gray.
Yeah.
So first off, you know, why am I doing the triathlon? And you don't even have to have a big reason to do it, but what's this need that I have this, like, what you're describing is like a compulsion.
Yeah.
And I think that's where the challenge lies. And this can go back to, you know, anything. Like, how are we using it and what are we using it for? We were talking last night, like, you know, we've got the opioids that people are abusing. You know, we've got heroin, we've got opium I mean, this is not a new problem, by the way. I mean, opium dens have been around for a long time.
Very long time.
It was also very legal. It was the Bear Heroin Company. It was like, take heroin for a stomach ache, you know.
Yeah.
Like,
Coca-Cola has the word Coke in it for a reason too.
So, you know, but then there's the other side where we've been able to make medicines from it that help people have surgeries, deal with pain. I think there's an argument to be made that more people have been able to like lengthen their life and survive things because of opioids.
Yeah, totally.
Both directions. And then we trace it back, it all came from a poppy, which was a flower.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just a flower. How do we manipulate it to make the compounds? And then how are we using it?
Yeah.
Or as the greatest philosopher ever, Homer Simpson said, beer, the cause of and solution to all the world's problems.
Yeah, totally.
What are you using it for?
Right.
And this is where it's hard because sometimes people they don't see that yet. And it takes a level of honesty and reflection to be able to do that. But also people are, you know, these are the strategies that they've developed to survive. Mm-hmm. Whether they realize it or not, they might not be thinking, I'm going to die if I don't do a triathlon. But if someone's thinking like, if I don't do this thing, I'm not going to be okay.
Right.
I'm not going to be okay is in the direction of I'm going to die.
Yeah.
It's like almost all anxiety is a death anxiety.
Right. What you said about the wonderful Homer Simpson quote, it reminds me of we had this guy, Dean Statman, on recently, and he wrote this piece for GQ about how his New Year's resolution was to drink more because he'd done, you know, he'd listened to too many health podcasts, read too many stories, and stopped drinking.
I listened to it. I loved what you said. His goal was to get on the wagon. No, maybe it was to fall off the wagon.
Yeah, fall off the wagon.
Yeah.
So he was a moderate drinker, though. And so he goes sober for, I think it was 3 or 4 months. And he realized that his life got worse because he wasn't going out and socializing. And so he started to drink again. And again, he's a moderate drinker. I think that is the key. And he realized, oh, like this is helping me be social. It's putting me in situations that are enhancing my life. Alcohol for me is ultimately something that overall, big picture, improves my life. Yes, he could be like, oh, if I have a beer, my whoop score goes down 5 points, whatever. But he goes, overall, I think this is a good thing for me. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, listen, we see people now wearing continuous glucose monitors, right? Which is they many of them probably aren't diabetic. They're managing, they want, but they're doing this for a reason that they want to see what I mean, I don't know why everybody's doing it, but I think generally it's to see how certain food affects them. I guess some food can infect you, right? But see how some food affects them and optimizing their health in some way. So But if they're not diabetic and they're doing that, like, okay, they could probably have some dessert and see it go up, and it's not going to impact them. And I know not all diabetics can't have dessert, but if you're diabetic, on the other hand, and your insulin is out, your blood sugar is out of control, and you haven't been able to manage your insulin, and you're eating a pint of ice cream every night, I mean, those are two very different things. Where the person that's trying to optimize their health, like if all their friends are going out for ice cream and their kids are with them and they want to have ice cream to enjoy it, then by all means, go do it.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's the exact correlation, but, I think even in some of the writings in Alcoholics Anonymous that I can talk about from like an academic perspective, they don't say this is what you have to do. They say, we don't have a monopoly on this. If you don't think you're an alcoholic, go out and try some controlled drinking. If you can do it, our hats are off to you. Yeah. That for most people, it says, drinking means conviviality, release from boredom and fear, and it's adding to their life.
Yeah.
And what is alcohol even called? It's called spirits.
Yeah.
Right? It raises people's spirits, lowers their inhibitions of doing that for years. If it's something that's a problem for you, then it's a problem for you.
Yeah.
And it's not doing that. I reached a point, sounds like you reached a point, a lot of other people I know reached a point where it wasn't helping anymore. In fact, it was making it worse.
Yeah.
But I also know in my history, I believe I had a spiritual relationship with alcohol.
Yeah.
Because we talk about a power greater than yourself. Like I was turning to alcohol as a power greater than myself. It was the thing that I was using as like to raise my spirit, to be okay. Like I could literally be in a place where I was suicidal, wasn't drinking, was like, I can't do this life anymore. And then I would have some drinks, and 2 hours later, I'd be in a bar trying to convince some girl how great I was.
Mm-hmm.
Like it worked.
Yeah. I think people who aren't familiar with people like us, I guess I would say.
Us people.
Yeah, us people. Is that the addictive behavior or substance, it immediately solves all your problems. If you're having a shitty day, things are wrong. Like I know for me at least, the best place in the world is like a smoky bar that has a jukebox that plays George Jones and a bartender who is just like, we'll keep lining them up, and just you get in there and I'm just like, everything is perfect with the world, no matter what is going on in my life. Eventually, though, that stops working. Although those first handful of drinks, life is perfect in that moment. But then the costs of what happens afterwards start to outweigh things. And you go, yes, I can still, in my mind, go, if I were to go out and drink right now, I can tell you my life would be fucking awesome those first 4 or 5 drinks. But then it's like, I get the idea, oh, maybe you can do this. And you keep doing, and then, 5 months later, it's like, well, the bank's coming for the house, honey. I'm sorry.
Well, and so for you, right, it's like, okay, you have a recognition in that statement that, it might be the 8th or 10th or 20th drink that does that, but you've said you don't have a governor on it that you can stop from getting there, or you can't predict. That's another part. Like some people will have this illusion of control, but if you can't predict the times that you're going to have control, then you really don't have control. So what you're describing is I can't control once I start whether I'm going to get to 12 or not.
Yeah.
So the solution is stay away from the first one.
Exactly.
Right? It's not if you're going to get hit by a train, it's not the caboose that kills you. Right. It's the engine.
Yeah.
It's the first one.
Totally.
Which is also a very freeing thing, because for people that recognize that, they don't have to not drink like all the alcohol. They just have to stay away from one. That's another thing. Like you just have to stay away from the first one.
Yeah.
The thing that opens the door into the next, it's like, if it's Archimedes' lever, like what's going to get you your biggest results?
Right.
And it's same thing for not drinking. Like, okay, I have to stay away from this one thing, but it's going to it's a lever that's going to impact the rest of my life greatly. And I think it's not just around alcohol. It's not just around drugs. It's around whatever people identify. If that guy realizes, or the guys I think you said it was a Wall Street Journal, realize that their lives are falling apart because of these triathlons, then maybe it's stopping the triathlon or doing it differently or having a different viewpoint that, I'm a guy that's going to enjoy triathlons. I'm never going to like be the champion of the world. But so how do I fit and get enjoyment out of life being mediocre sometimes?
Yeah. I think, I always am somewhat grateful that if I'm going to pick a problem to have in this domain, that mine was alcohol, because I can just not drink, right? It's very black or white. Just don't drink. But I always wonder with people who have a problem with like food.
Oh, yeah.
Or these things that you need to do in order to survive. Have you ever worked with people like that?
Yeah.
Like, what the hell? How the hell does that even work?
Well, I mean, it's interesting with things, we call them like the process addictions a lot. But, things that fit in there are like, food. So eating disorders or disordered eating, things around sex and love, things around money or gambling. There's other ones that fit in there, gaming, stuff like that. But like, especially with anything around sex, food, and money, like you can't, the sex isn't always about, I suppose people can live without sex, but like a healthy, intimate relationship is going to have that. But it's really not always about the sex. It's about something, the intimacy or connection or not being able to get it. But those are things that we need, like you said. How hard would it be for you if in order to cure your alcoholism, you had to take a half a shot of whiskey every day?
It'd be miserable.
Right. Because you want a lot more than a half a shot.
You take that, yeah.
Right?
I remember when I was I wouldn't even drink. I was cognizant enough about my drinking that I would never just have one if it was a situation where like I wasn't going to be able to have 10 many more. I would just, I'm not going to drink.
You're real special.
Because if you can just have one, if it was just one only, once that one is done, I'm like the most uncomfortable person. I'm just like, Jesus Christ, I gotta get another.
So, but this is oversimplifying it, but like people have to eat, right? So like if their relationship is with food, which it's more than about the food. It might, for many people, it's about like things that were out of control in their life. And this is the thing that they can control. It's not like that forever. That's not the same for everybody, but they have to be able to develop behaviors. If they, in recovery, what we have them do is develop behaviors that, there's not like an abstinence model around that.
Right.
Right. So some of the things in like sex addiction recovery, they'll talk about like, kind of red light, yellow light, green light behaviors, and those are going to be different for everybody. You have to define what your sobriety is. You have to define what recovery is. And I think that's the same thing for things with, eating and with money. We were talking a lot about gambling yesterday. And not everybody that gambles, we're in Las Vegas going through the casinos. I don't think the majority of the people we saw aren't like losing their houses and their lives are falling apart. But there's a subset of people that will. And it's actually with that one is a very high suicide rate compared to other addictions. It's a very interesting one to me because like it's the next hit can solve all your problems.
Yeah. That's a really unique aspect of it. Like for me, it's not like if I could go, oh, maybe if I take the 10th drink, everything in my life is just going to change immediately.
Right.
Yeah.
Or you're like, I know this isn't, if someone's going to the crack house, they're not like thinking this is going to change my life forever. They know it's going to change their life right then, right? And they're not really looking at that, long-term thing. But, people, I'll have people like, he's $100,000 in debt. And when I often talk to the person that's $100,000 in debt in gambling, it's not even real money. It's like that's just one bet.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's sometimes in a weird way.
You talk to them a week later, they're like, hey, swings are swings. I'm up $200,000.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so, the next thing can solve all their problems. It's not actually solving all their problems because there's probably something underneath that's driving them. But, it also then when they do lose everything, it can have like your whole world like kind of collapse on you. And, I've with somebody like that, they might find that they have to stay completely abstinent from that part, but also recognize the other areas of life that might trigger that. You drive down the road, you see what the lottery is, you investing in stocks or in crypto or anything like that. People can approach that in a way that's like like gambling.
Do you find that when people stop with one addiction, it can transfer over to something else, kind of like you just mentioned, maybe not even in the exact same domain, because, gambling and if you're doing daily crypto trading, that feels similar. But do you ever find that, like, if someone gets sober from alcohol or heroin or whatever it is, that then they pick up something totally different, like whether it be exercise or whether it be, I don't know, something else?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's not like a thing that like it moves over to something else right away. I think it's that.
I think the question is, do you believe there's addictive personalities or not?
Yes. It's not a clinical definition or anything like that, but I think people who tend to be thrown to that or shaped in that way, it's like they've got some sort of angst, discomfort, energy that they don't know how to
deal with
necessarily, right? I mean, and I think we've got more of that than ever. You write about that extensively. We used to walk, 10 miles a day and carry stuff.
Yeah.
We don't do that.
We're not expending that energy.
We're not expending that energy.
Go somewhere.
It's got to go somewhere. And if we looked at it from the perspective of at some point for someone who recognizes that they've got an addiction, if it's a substance use, that they're using it as a medicine, if you haven't really addressed the underlying issue, in this case might be the underlying angst or kind of existential view of yourself in the world, then you might start finding other things to medicate.
Deal with that, yeah.
Right? And then, that can have its own, it can build its own momentum, especially if it's something that's, really fun to do.
Right.
Or makes it easy to win money or, I recognize this. I don't have I've never had an issue with gambling, although I see that I probably could if I so I don't enough. Yeah, I mean, I'll go. I'll do some fun stuff every once in a while, with the Super Bowl or whatever. But here's one thing I recognize: I'll be driving down the road, and for me, like anytime I'm under any sort of stress, like my focus, and I know this about myself, will go toward money. It's like something I feel like I could control, and money's almost never the issue, and I know this because, regardless of whether there's a bunch of money in the bank or no money in the bank, it's the same thing. So it can't be about the money. But if I'm driving down the road and I see the Powerball at like $1 billion, and I start thinking about it, like I can actually feel in my body, this sense of like I'm fantasizing about it, and I'm like, holy cow!
Like I'm gonna get a yacht. I'm gonna get you start like,
right. And that's very, I start thinking first, Michael, about all the good that I'm going to do in the world and the foundations I'm going to start, and then I'll buy a yacht.
You can come hang out on my yacht. I'll kick a couple bucks to your foundations too.
I'm justifying it already inside of me. I'm a manipulator. But, so if I'm doing that, just like recognizing that, just kind of driving by something. I used to actually do this meditation with these young guys that I had in these groups. And I remember most of the guys were like in their 20s and they were kind of oriented towards making money and stuff. And all of these guys were this was in a treatment center. And I had them close their eyes and imagine that they woke up in the morning and there was $1 billion in their bank account. And like I really walked them through it and their eyes closed, and I had them open their eyes and explain what they were experiencing. And like, my heart's opening. I feel bigger. Like I feel, this feels, like the same thing, like me seeing I'm going to buy this. Then I had them close their eyes and guided them through something again and said, all right, now I want you to imagine that you wake up the next morning and half of it is gone. And walk through that, and like they woke up, they were like, I'm upset, I'm angry. Like they literally, their whole demeanor had changed. They still had $500 million,
right?
And most of these guys had no thousands of dollars, right? Like, so it was like, so I don't remember where this was coming from, but this like, the transferring, like if we find something that we think is going to give us that kind of sense of ease and comfort, I think we'll go after it, especially people that have kind of been thrown to that in other ways.
Yeah.
We look for distractions. Michael Singer, who wrote The Untethered Soul, and if you ever read that book, and he wrote The Surrender Experiment. It's a great book. I used to go to his place, the Temple of the Universe, and it's outside of Ocala, Florida, in Alachua. And I'm not going to quote him exactly, but I remember he used to say, like, when we fall in love with somebody, he said something like this: when you fall in love with somebody, you know, we're like, we assign like our okayness or this feeling that we're getting to that person. And he would describe what's really happening is like, they're enough of a distraction. Like he would say that in kind of from a yogic perspective, like we have this, we generate this like endless love, joy, like within us. And that's been like clogged in some way. And this person that we meet is like enough of a distraction for us to actually fall in love with ourselves.
That's interesting.
But we assign it to them.
Yeah.
So now we're leaning on them. And so, 3 months later when they, chew their food a certain way that you don't like, or they fart in bed or whatever it is, or they're not doing the thing that you think they should be doing anymore, that now we assign that to, the misery to them.
Yeah.
And his argument wasn't to not be in relationships, but it was more, and another example he used was like, someone could be like miserable in their job, unhappy where they live, they don't like them, and then they meet her or they meet him and like everything's okay for a period of time. It was like this distraction to experience what flows within me. And I think his argument wasn't to not get in relationships, but it was to be able to really like clear out these, in Alcoholics Anonymous letters will talk about like these channels that are filled with fear, frustration, anger. From a yogic perspective, they'll talk about us being like a tube, a sushumna, and we have these experiences in life that kind of, they call nadis, that kind of block the energy. In psychological terms, we call them traumas or stressors, right? They would call them samskaras, like scars, and be able to clear that out so that we can experience the energy that we're generating, and then share that with I'm sorry if this is sounding a little bit too like out there, but like fall in love with myself in a way that now I can share that with you. I'm not falling in love. Maybe I am, but
it's okay.
It's okay.
It happens.
We can do that. We're sober. Right?
Yeah, we're sober. But we've gone to Phish together. So
we've gone to Phish, but now I'm sharing that rather than taking that. That I'm okay. Falling in love with yourself, what does that mean? Like whatever it means to the person, but like I'm okay as I am.
Yeah.
And now I can go share that with others rather than I need you, I need this thing, I need this substance in order to just be out.
You got your own foundation rather than using someone or something else's.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on social media and that as a behavior? Does it cause a lot of problems? Is it, or is it just like we talked about with alcohol? It depends on how you're using it.
Does the answer that I give depend on how many followers I'll gain from this podcast?
Let's do 2 takes.
And we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
We'll do an A/B test and see what goes. Because I won't be okay if I don't get X. I think this is an interesting topic, and probably there's a lot of opinions on it.
Yeah, strong ones,
very strong ones. Do I think that? I think like anything else, there's some like kind of going back to the poppy, like what it on one hand, what it's created is pretty incredible.
Yeah. Like
I wouldn't have been able to go to probably the Phish show with you last night and have a good time if there wasn't social media and we'd met.
Yeah, we met on Instagram.
On Instagram after, I was on Andrew's podcast and then you were going on it, right? So like I've met people all over the world. I've got this kid who found me who literally lives in India when he's asked me for help, and so I'll meet with him like once a month, and
that's awesome.
And when he turns on his screen, it literally looks like it looks like the backdrop is like Slumdog Millionaire, right?
Wow.
Like I never would have had this connection with him. I've had therapists in Nigeria reach out to me to talk about what they're doing with addiction. I've made these really cool connections. I've been able to reconnect with friends from history. I think, the positives to it are extremely positive. Now, is there a dark seedy side of it. I'm sure that, these are for-profit companies. Of course, they want you using it. Are there things that people are distracting themselves with? 100%. Are they helping to create that? I don't know. I mean, I think it is something that's very compelling and people can use to completely distract themselves. But I think, is it creating the problem? I don't know that it created the problem. I think it exacerbates whatever problems we're having if people are using it in a way that's not the beneficial way we talked about. And what I mean by that is, there's this quote I like from Pascal, the mathematician, kind of a heavy thinker of his time. He was like in the 1600s, and he said, all of humanity's problems stem from man's inability to sit alone in a room by himself.
Yeah.
There was no social media then.
Right. 1600s.
1600s. You go back to the Yoga Sutras, which is like this old yogic text. And I really think a lot of the old yogis, they were almost like, and I've talked to neuroscientists about this, so they're like neuroscientists without studying the brain. I mean, they really talked about, the things that they talked about were really like neural pathways and understanding how we responded to things. But in this document that's anywhere from 2,500 to 4,000 years old, he said, it starts off saying, the purpose for yoga is now. So what is yoga? It was union. So he's saying the purpose for union is now. And this is kind of like union of mind, body, spirit. Mm-hmm. Well, if the purpose of the time for union is now. If the time for union is now, that must mean that you're in disunion. Mm. You wouldn't need union if you weren't in disunion, right? So they're already saying 4,000 years ago, we're in some sort of disunion. And then went on to say that the purpose of it is to still the fluctuations of the mind. And the fluctuations of the mind, there's 5, I'm going to give the first 4, are right thinking, wrong thinking, imagination, and memory. Mm-hmm. Right thinking and wrong thinking is like everything we know or don't know, what we know that we know, what we know that we don't know, all of that stuff. That's kind of like our ego development, how we're seeing the world. Our memory, everything from our history that kind of programs how we see an event. And, we're all going to see events differently. Yeah. Lawyers will tell you that eyewitness testimony is the worst, especially if you have more than one eyewitness. Yeah. Because they can all see a completely different thing. And then our memory, everything that we're making up. Mm-hmm. So they're talking about this 4,000 years ago. This is not a social media problem. And what were people using to distract themselves throughout history? I think in some ways they didn't need to distract themselves at certain points because they were just working on the farm all day. Right. I'm not suggesting that's what we go back to. But I often wonder, because of this, if social media, which I think has its own problems and challenges, and I'm a dad of an 18-year-old, a 7-year-old, and a 4-year-old, and like I don't, I don't think that they should, like my 7 and 4-year-old shouldn't be out there, on social media,
looking at whatever, posting whatever.
It's just like, but is it sometimes the scapegoat? And I'm not saying this I'm not a spokesman for Meta. I'm not saying that there aren't those challenges, but is there something else that we're not dealing with? And this becomes the thing that, we have to fix this. And it becomes this thing that it's not going anywhere. Right. So now we're trying to control something that in many ways we can't control or is so big. And it sets up this like trap that we're never going to get out of this. I don't know that it's the kids on the screens. It might be the parents on the screens. Yeah. And how are they distracted? And,
what are they not using that time for, especially with their kids? Right. And
then it lends to this thing like, okay, and I'm a Gen X person, right? I grew up in the we didn't have any sort of trackers or, my parents, until I was like an hour late, they weren't worried at all, or maybe even 2 hours later. We were talking last night, there was the stuff on the news, they used to literally say, it's 10 o'clock, do you know where your children are? Which is funny. They had to remind parents that they had kids. Where are they? Now, it's like your phone has a tracker on it, and if they're not where they are right away, it's like creating this level of
urgency,
anxiety, and emergency. And it's very easy for me to think like, okay, my generation was better than this. Not better generation, but the way that we grew up was better than the way that they were growing. Maybe true, but
maybe not.
Maybe not, and that's not going to happen. Right. And so I think as parents, it can be easy to try to get our kids to understand and live in the world that we were in versus understanding the world that they're in, and understanding their world. I don't know if this is answering your question around social media. I think I just think there's more questions to be asked rather than saying this is the problem we need to get rid of. That may be the case, right? We may need to moderate it in ways and shut it down for kids at certain ages. I mean, I think there's definitely predatory behavior. It's just also like I don't think any of us have really come to a place where we know how to handle it yet. I think it's still very clunky. I don't know if it's social media, but just this ability to be connected to anyone in the world at any moment.
Yeah, and any piece of information ever.
Right. We're like, we're not that far away from living in tribes that we didn't know what was happening more than a couple miles away.
Right.
And it's really great. I mean, like, I live in Florida. We get hurricanes. Back then, like, whenever they'd be like, oh, it's going to rain today. And then they just get decimated.
Next thing you know, 100-mile-an-hour winds.
We see it coming off the coast of Africa. But, the downside to that is, like, we're very, I think many of the stats show we live in a less violent, more peaceful time than any time in history, which it doesn't seem like because we see it all.
Right. 90% of news is negative in general. And that's held from, so this really started in the 1830s, I believe. There's a guy named Benjamin Day. And before this, most newspapers in New York were covering like business, basic stuff, boring. He comes in and he goes, and they were making money off of subscriptions. He goes, I think I could make money off of attention, which is all to say I could get companies to put advertisements. And the more people I get to read my newspaper, the more I can charge for an ad spot. So then the question is, well, how do I get people to read my newspaper? And he starts running stories about murder, suicides, dramas, all this shit. And it becomes the biggest newspaper in New York in about a year. And that's been the model ever since. It's like, newspapers are not selling their news, they're selling advertisers to get people to look at. The more readers you have, the more money you can make. And what do people focus on? It tends to be negative stuff. And so that 90% rule has held even as the world has become safer and better by every metric overall.
Yeah, I mean, and people say, well, we're addicted to bad news. I think that's 100% true. And it makes sense because it's more important for me to know where danger is than really where safety is.
Yeah.
It's more important for me to know if you're coming at me with a knife than to hug me.
Yeah.
That part of our body is way more powerful because its job and only job is to keep us alive.
Yeah.
And we look at the diagnosis of PTSD, right, at the far end of the spectrum of people who experience traumatic events and how they're reacting to life. In the DSM-5, it says that the person was exposed to actual or threatened, death, danger, whatever. In the DSM-4, it said real or perceived. Mm-hmm. And what that meant was like, if it's really happening, if it was really happening to you, actually, you're going to have a certain reaction to it. If you thought it was going to happen, you can have a very similar reaction. That's the quote unquote success of terrorism. It's not that these two buildings came down. It's that now we think every building's coming down.
There could be another.
Right. It's very important for us to understand where that threat is. Our legal system recognizes that. You can be arrested for assault or battery. Battery is you beat the crap out of me. Assault is you said you're going to beat the crap out of me or you're going to kill me. And I don't think we're not always thinking about that, but we'll live under these. And so our attention does get drawn to that. Mm-hmm. It's not going to, I don't think it's ever, I think we're wired for that in a way that we're not going to get pulled toward the other stuff, and now, so we'll see something that happens, halfway around the world and a bomb goes off in a mall in Africa. And that doesn't mean I shouldn't have empathy and care and concern, but if a bomb goes off in a mall in Africa and I go into survival mode and start, grabbing my kids out of school and throwing them in a closet in the United States, that's a problem.
Right.
And so I don't think we know how to handle that yet, or it just from an evolutionary perspective. So like, I don't think that helps for kids to be able, when they're just trying to figure out how to navigate the world and be in relationships, that they have the entire world to connect to in that moment. Now, is that the world they're going to live in? And we've got to like expose them to it at some point? Probably, but I don't know what the total answer for that is. You know?
Something, correct me if I'm wrong, something I've heard you say is you help people be good at feeling bad.
Yeah. I say that maybe I'll start putting it on the website, but like I think really at the core of when people are in therapy or coaching, you know, that, or especially therapy, it's about teaching them how to feel bad, to be able to build emotional resilience and distress tolerance. I mean, this is very much in line with like everything you talk about in the comfort crisis, you know, that it's easier to deal with life when things are going the way that we want them to go. Yeah. It's when they're not going the way that we want them to go, and we're having, you know, because that's life. You know, that's another thing I got in from the people in recovery. It's like things break and people die, and we're going to experience sadness. We're going to experience times of fear. You know, I mean, I think this is where we have, you know, in the U.S. anyway, I forget what the number is, but the lion's share by far, probably upwards, I could be, don't quote me on the numbers, but I mean, it's like way above 50% of like antidepressants are prescribed by GPs, right? So not saying none of them have the training, but I would argue that even if they're prescribed by a psychiatrist, the average psychiatric diagnosis in the U.S. is like something ridiculous, like 12 to 18 minutes. Yeah. Like, how could you know the whole person then and understand them in that moment? And it's people are giving you their symptoms based on their own perspective in that moment, which people are poor historians just based on, you know, we're looking back through the lens of now, looking back and saying, I'm depressed now. So, you know, 2 weeks ago I was happier and my life was great, when that may not be the case. Right. Or 6 weeks ago, I've been depressed for 20 years, which may not be the case. And so we're going to feel bad in life. It's part of it.
In fact, life would be boring if you never felt bad occasionally.
Right. Well, when we're available for the depths of pain, we become available for the heights of joy, you know, and so I think a lot of people that, you know, will come in with, you know, maybe are prescribed medications, and I'm not against medications. I think they should be used. I don't think medications are the problem. I think how diagnoses are given and how medications are prescribed and given is a bigger problem. You know, some people will say, well, you will never convince me otherwise that certain antidepressants haven't saved people's lives. I've seen it again and again and again. It doesn't mean though that they have to be on it forever. Right? Maybe some people do have to be on stuff for a long time. Yeah. It's how do we use these things?
I think it also doesn't mean that people who have just some of the everyday problems of living need to be on
100%. I think sometimes we'll say, I'm depressed, and they're walking in with that diagnosis they've given themselves, when in reality they're sad. And if you look at the conditions of their life, it makes sense that they're sad right now.
Yeah.
Now, does that not mean that having these, if the sadness, you know, and the depressive symptoms last for a while, even if they might not qualify for major depressive disorder, that doesn't mean that maybe for a period of time something could help them, but there's different things that we can try. And we also want to look at, you know, what's going on with them medically and other things like that. But aside from that, you know, we're going to experience worry.
Yeah.
We're going to experience pain. We're going to experience sadness. You know, I love my parents. I have a great relationship with them. They're awesome grandparents. You know, if everything goes the way that we think it's going to go, they'll pass away before me. You know, I suppose I could, but I mean, if nothing drastic, I don't when it happens, I'm not going to like it.
Yeah.
I'm going to be a mess.
Right.
And I actually hope I am. In the moment, I'm going to wish I wasn't a mess, but I don't want to these people that I've loved my whole life and mean so much to me, my kids, I don't want to be like,
yeah,
what's for lunch?
Right. Because if you're a mess, it suggests it was meaningful.
Yeah. And so, you know, what are the conditions in our lives and the situations that might be leading to some of these things? So that's getting back to we got to learn how to feel bad.
Yeah.
We got to learn to be able to be in that space of discomfort so that we can have the power to choose, that we can move from reacting to triggers and reacting to the impressions and the stimulus and move to being able to respond to them.
Yeah. Do you think that some of what we societally would think of as negative, whether it be addiction or other mental disorders, do you think those can sometimes become superpowers if they're directed in the right area? I'll give you an example. A lot of definitions of addiction, but if we think about it as persistence despite negative consequences. So when I applied that to alcohol, not good. But when I applied that to my writing life, the fact that I could sit down at a keyboard at 4 a.m. and it's always hard, it always sucks, it's all negative for like the first hour. But I can persist against that. And then eventually the words come out. And so it's like sometimes if things can be sort of redirected, that can be good for us in a way.
Yeah. I mean, do you find that, when you look back at your history, were you using alcohol in those periods of time to be able to push through?
Well, I think if it's just, I knew there was downsides in a lot of ways, but I kept doing that, even though it solved the problem in the short term, but it's like that sort of persistence and just keeping going.
Yeah, I think that it goes back to a little bit of what we were talking around the energy that we have in our bodies and how it's kind of directed.
Yeah.
And if we're not using it in ways that kind of fulfill us or meet some sort of purpose or have some sort of direction or aim. Again, if you don't have aim, you're aimless. So now you're walking around aimless and have all this energy. And so we're looking at something to kind of to level that.
Get it out, yeah.
Or you get it out, to level it. It's a great, it works. It works really fast. So I think it's less about like transferring the addictive personality to being able to use the energies and recognize that we're generative beings and where are we going to put what we're generating? I think a lot of people will find that this was me. I was doing something that, I'm not blaming it on this, but like I was also felt very down and stuck because my life didn't feel like it had any purpose to it, and I wasn't, and that doesn't mean everybody has to go out and, become a therapist or become a teacher. In fact, a lot of what I'll work with people on is, and I see it a lot, is that people confuse their purpose with what they do. And what we do can be a great vehicle for our purpose.
Okay. So
for an example, if my purpose, and it was to be a therapist and work with people and help them work through their addictions and trauma. Okay, so that's great. Now, how many hours a week can I spend doing that? If that's my purpose is to do that, then almost in that way, anything else that I'm doing that's not that is in conflict with my purpose.
Yeah.
Like sitting on the couch with my kids watching a kid's Netflix movie for the 45th time, right? Or watching, they're little and they're, kids born in the 2020s, and we've had to watch Home Alone from the 90s like 150 times, right?
Hey, that's good.
So, then in a way that's in conflict with my purpose, and I'll anytime that I'm not doing this, I'm not going to feel fulfilled. If I look back and go, okay, what is being a therapist and doing therapist and helping people? What is that providing? What do I, who am I in almost like an ontological study, which is a study of a being. Like, okay, I get to be in service. I get to be, a contribution, right? So maybe my purpose is to be in service to my fellow man. Now, that is not tied to a destination. Like once I am in my office or once I'm working with this many people or once I get this degree, that's something I can do today.
Yeah.
And that's something I can do watching Home Alone with my kids for the 200th time. I can be in service to them. So now my purpose is more about who I be rather than what I do. But the things that I do can be a vehicle for that.
That makes sense. How important do you think community is for helping solve these sorts of issues?
Oh, I think community is, right up there with sleep.
Yeah.
Nutrition,
fitness.
I think we're communal beings. We're not back in our evolution, we're not at the top of the food chain. I mean, we are now because you can live somewhere now because of technology. And when I say technology, I mean everything from, computers, but also to guns and,
running water
and other things like that. But we didn't survive alone, and we were built to be in these tribes and we feel safe in them. I mean, I remember reading, I think it was, which book was it? Maybe it was Tribe by Sebastian Unger, where he talks about people like missing war zones.
Yeah.
In England, which, when they were all in the tunnels together, or I think it was after 9/11 that where everybody
kind of came together.
I mean, there was really interesting in my personal experiences, long before I was a therapist, but, I was in my early 20s and mid 20s when 9/11 happened. And I've never felt more like an American and connected to everybody than probably the week after that.
Totally.
And I'm not suggesting that's what we need to have happen or want to happen but it was, we had this common ground, and the common ground feels safe. It feels good. We're on the same mission. We're together. I don't, and not only that, but the thing that you were talking about, perspective. I mean, two heads are better than one. We want to talk about power greater than yourself. Just us having a conversation and being able to see things from a different way, to be able to disagree, and invention only happens through disagreement, right? We have to say, I don't agree with how it is. I don't agree that light can only come from fire, right? Someone had to say that, whether that was Tesla or Edison. I don't know. You can leave that up to we can do two takes on that.
Yeah, there you go.
Your viewers do, but. And even in my work in our work as therapists, we're helping, we're having people kind of disagree with their histories in a way to invent a new way of living. But I think being able to do stuff like that in community is so important. And I think that's why, I heard you guys talking about this on one of your other episodes with the guy, the GQ writer.
Dean Sattman.
Yeah, we were people finding common ground in bars.
Yeah.
Where, and you talked about your friend that wrote the book where, the political kind of people on different sides of the aisle, which is weird to say because most people in the bar aren't actually on the aisles, but I think people know what I mean, but it kind of disappears. They had this common, you can walk into a bar and sit next to a stranger and talk. You said that, sit next to a stranger and it's not weird to just start talking to them. I think that's
the bar has the context of it's okay to just talk to a random stranger. Where if I'm at Starbucks and sit next to someone and I start talking to them, they're going to be if it's a woman, they might be, is this person hitting on me? If it's a guy, they're going to be is this person on drugs or homeless? Or it's a little weirder,
Yeah, but I mean, I think we naturally seek those things. Sports teams, right? If you're wearing the same football team hat as somebody on an airplane, you're probably more likely to talk to them, or you have something to open that. Just like the alcohol kind of opens it in a bar. We went to see Phish last night. I'm not one of the guys that follows Phish around. I've been to a few shows in my life. I wanted to see the Sphere. It was going to be a good experience. It was a great experience. But a lot of the people in there, they're at all the shows that they're doing.
Yeah.
We walked in, I don't know if you saw it, but when we walked in the seat, this guy, after we came back from the bathroom, this guy hugged me.
That was awesome.
It might have been influenced by something out, but there was this other people I saw that seemingly didn't know each other, high-fiving each other.
Yeah.
I think, we find this in spiritual communities. There's some sort of common connection that we get that we can open up. 12-step, meetings have been so valuable, and people will argue against this and because people like to argue against everything, but it provides it provides the same sort of container as the bar did.
Yeah.
And people have this, in some ways, we were talking about this yesterday, in some ways, that stigma that there is against alcoholism and drug, it kind of brings these people together, and it's like a badge of honor, oh, I know you. You see somebody walk out of there, you say, people in AA will say to other people, oh, are you a friend of Bill? Bill Wilson. And so they know that, and it's kind of this language, and then there's this instant connection. And I'm not saying everybody has to go to 12-step meetings, but finding a community and a place to fit and be safe is extremely important.
Yeah.
Alone, I will make up the worst parts of the world and myself, and I need that connection with others. I mean, I think we're built that way. I mean, I know there's a lot of work around the opposite of addiction is connection, and I don't know that I always agree with like it's the opposite thing, but I think connection is so important. Now, for some people, you can't just throw people when they've been addicted or traumatized into those types of environments, because for them, connection or what they believe is connection may have been very dangerous. Someone who's been abused in their home. I've worked with kids that are young men that we were, people were telling to go to like 12-step programs, find a sponsor, tell them, go through the steps with them, which involves kind of an inventory, which is kind of like go find an older experienced guy and tell him your secrets. Well, what this kid had never told us, and we found out in treatment, is that, he was abused by a scoutmaster or a teacher. So like going to an older guy and telling your secrets wasn't really a source of safety. Now that doesn't mean that thing's the problem, but there was work that sometimes we need to do with people to be able to connect, or find how you can connect with one person and build community that way. It doesn't have to be throwing yourself into, a 20,000 person arena where you're going to get hugged by a Phish fan that you don't know.
It'd be a lot cooler if you did.
You know what? It really, really would.
You mentioned power greater than yourself. How do you see that play out with people you work with? How important is that? How does it get defined?
I mean, I think at the core of everything, alcoholism, drug addiction, anything that kind of is blocking us from who we are and our full expression is a spiritual malady.
Yeah.
That begs the question, what is spirituality? For some people that they find that in a religious context and practices, I think it's returning to the spirit that we already are, that a spiritual process is not going to get something that we don't have. It's about returning to who we already are.
Yeah. I
think we're kind of born perfect, whole, and complete, and our experiences in life kind of start to cover some of that up. That's why we see kids that they think they can be and do anything. My friend's kid many years ago, I remember she was 4, and I said, what does Kayla want to be when she grows up? And they said, a cheetah. Of course, awesome. She can't be a cheetah, right? But, she thought in her way that she could, and there'll be a point at which she realizes she can't, and maybe will be crushed by that. She's older now.
Or joins a furry community.
Joins a furry community. But, I see that with my kids. But I think some people, that stuff, that innocence starts getting covered up very, very early, maybe even pre-birth, when they're in the womb and they're attached to their mother's nervous system that is very, maybe if they're very scared or traumatized themselves. I think that's a lot of what we see with, when I've worked in treatment centers and things like that, we've had always 15 to 20% of the people in there were adopted, and maybe even into good homes, but their nervous system was kind of set in a way that it didn't fit into the environment that they were in. They were kind of, this is my belief, probably unsupported by evidence, which a lot of my beliefs might be, is that our nervous system kind of develops to prepare us for the environment that we're coming into. I think we're very intuitive beings, and we're not just like alive the moment we take that breath. I mean, there's a lot going on before that as we're developing. But so some sort of spiritual awakening, to and in that finding a power greater than yourself. Why is that so important? Because if I'm not doing that, that's saying that I'm the greatest power.
Universe,
whether that's from like a selfish self, but a lot of people, that means I have to control everything. I have to manage everything. I have to do the impossible. And that creates that's where so much of the effects of trauma, anxiety, stress all come from. I'm trying to manage stuff that I can't, and the amount of things that we can control are so small. Like, I mean, I can control certain things. Like I can control knocking this cup off the table. even if it's falling on the tile floor, it's still, I can't promise that it's going to break.
Yeah.
I can't force all of these things. So I think in addiction is a search for a power greater than themselves. I always will say alcohol was a power greater than myself. Saved my life. Saved my life many times. It just wasn't a power great enough. And, so however people find that, some people find it in the power of the universe, the power of community, the power of being with one other person, and other people find it in their relationship with God or whatever that means to them. But I think that there's this, it's a very important question to ask and route to go down.
It's the biggest question.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Final 2 questions. And I know we can't give everyone the same thing. People are different. If someone is thinking, I overdo this thing, it's hurting me, what is the first thing you would tell them?
Setting aside where they're like actively suicidal or, drinking or doing drugs in a way that they need to be in a hospital.
Yeah.
We'll set that aside for a second. Say the question again.
They feel like they're overdoing something and it's hurting them.
Okay.
What would you tell them?
Stop it for 30 days. Make a commitment to stop it for 30 days. And then be honest with yourself and be aware of what's happening in that period of time. Mm-hmm. Are you able to stop for 30 days? That doesn't necessarily give you the answer that it's not controlling you or a problem or you're overdoing it. But even if you were able to, the whole time were you waiting for day 31? Were you thinking about it all the time? Were you organizing your life in a way that, I think a lot of people will fool themselves. I used to fool myself with that. I used to, I got into, even though I lived in Florida, I got into this like high altitude mountaineering. First I had done Mount Kilimanjaro, and then I went to like Mount Aconcagua, and I did ice climbing in Alaska. And this is all when and then we talked about I went to Bhutan, and this was all during the period of time I was drinking, but I would pull it together for a period of time to train for this thing. And then when it was over,
back to the races,
dumped off in Bangkok.
Yeah.
So
I'm going to get this flight to route through Bangkok on its way to Bhutan.
And that was actually after Kilimanjaro. No, I'm just kidding. I went from Africa but I mean, recognize what your relationship is with it. I think they also look at, am I overdoing it? Is it this thing? And how is it impacting my life negatively or positively, and being able to take an inventory of that. I think that's the stopping and seeing what can happen over that period of time and how you're thinking about it. It's kind of like the old remember Jeff Foxworthy? Like, here's your sign. Like,
totally.
If when drinking, you're thinking about not drinking, or when you're not drinking, you're thinking about drinking, you might be an alcoholic type of thing. So that's one way. The other way is to, get an assessment with somebody and be honest with them, and whether that's a therapist or a doctor or whatever the thing is, to find out, if they think they're overdoing sugar, maybe they should go get some blood tests and figure it out. Sometimes people are saying I'm overdoing something because today they didn't feel good about it, but when we look at their history, they're not.
Yeah.
Some people are saying I'm not overdoing it because 3 days a week they're not doing it, but they can't control what the days that they do overdo it or not.
Yeah.
Right. So
that makes sense.
But I think that's a great 30 days is not a magic number, but a period of time to try to intervene on it, stop it, and see what happens.
Yeah. All right. Final question. You could see any band or musician, living or dead.
Oh my God.
Live, any point in their career. Who are you choosing?
Oh, come on. Nirvana.
Like 1991.
Yeah. Like in a small bar.
Just a shitty bar in like Seattle.
Yeah. Which I wouldn't have even remembered the show.
That's the problem. I think my first answer was The Dead in 1972.
Oh, that'd be great also.
But then I was like, what if you saw Miles Davis in like right when he was coming up, like before it kind of blew? That would be awesome.
Oh yeah.
Just melt your face. It's a hard question. We're
leaving.
Like
go back into remember in Back to the Future when they were at the the dance from the movie Back to the Future, and he comes out and plays Johnny Be Good by Chuck Berry. Like, go see
everyone stops and just looks.
Just like, he's like, your kids will love it.
Yeah, exactly.
But I think there's also something to going back in time. I don't even know who it would be, but like hearing something that we don't even have a recording of.
Ryan, thanks for coming on the show, man.
Thanks for having me. This has been really great. I started off as a fan, so I love what you write. Awesome. I love the stories you tell. I like how you weave that in, and you're doing really important work in the world.
You are doing important work, man.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks to Ryan for coming on the show. And let me also note, Ryan would like to revise his choice for the band he would like to see live. He came up with this idea right after we turned off the recording. His answer has been revised to The Doors, which I personally think is a better answer. Thank you for listening. We are in your feeds twice a week, so please keep an eye out for more. If you have a question for our Ask Michael Anything section, please send it to media@twopct.com or drop it in the comments. We will try to answer as many questions as possible. If you want to send us an audio version of your question or even a video version, we would love to run that and answer it on air. As always, please don't forget to subscribe and have fun. Don't die.